and welcome to our May 5th edition of Talk Tuesday. We'll move to the next slide, please. I just want to begin our session by thanking all of the people and the groups that we have that bring this Talk Tuesday together. I want to thank everybody at the state. We have Dr. Kimberly Traverso with us today. We do not have Kari with us, and she'll be presenting a few slides. We have our wonderful Ed Advanced Tech team, our Director of Technology, Devana, and we have Dan running all the things in the back end. Devana has put a link to the slides for our time together today. I also want to thank Caroline. She is not with us today. She's dealing with some issues that she won't be able to come in today, but she will join us for our last session. And I finally want to thank our wonderful presenters. We have a wonderful trio of dynamic presenters today, and we are excited to hear what they have to say. Let's move on to the next slide, please. All right, just a few reminders from our past sessions. We have a link in the slide deck to the student support series. Registration is open and is linked in the slide for our May 21st session. There is a youth suicide prevention topic there. The presenters, I believe this is sponsored by the state and DCF. And so that again is linked in the chat and you can peruse it on your own time. Let's move to the next slide, please. Some more webinars from Attendance Works. Again, there's a few more, one more for the end of this year. It's engaging in building bridges over the summer. So a very timely topic. There are links to the individual sessions, and there's also a link on the bottom to register for all four webinars from Attendance Works at once. Let's move to the next slide, please. So again, another happening event, Friday Cafe. It's a professional network for community and family engagement. May 15th, there is a coffee and registration at 9 a.m. in Mystic, Connecticut. This also includes a free tour and admission to Mystic Aquarium. Again, the link is placed on the bottom of the slide for you to peruse and register on your own time. Let's move to that next slide, please. Another reminder, the CT Home Hub visit is a virtual training that is managed by CREC. It is staffed by CREC facilitators and coaches. The next training is on May 13th from 2 to 4 for those home visits, and the registration link is on the bottom. And just a reminder here that you do not need to be a LEAP district to be able to register for this. Any district can register. Next slide, please. So here's a link to a survey put together by our wonderful Caroline Calhoun. Kari, and all the team members take a lot of time to select presenters and topics that are appropriate for our attendance work. And so on your own time, please open the link on the slide. Additionally, our team members will be placing this link throughout our time together today. Please make sure that you give your thoughts, your opinions on our series for this year in order to put together some wonderful topics and presenters for next year. Thank you, Dan. All right, so our friend Kari Sullivan is not here today, but she did have a wonderful slide just demonstrating all the great work that was done by districts this year. So this chart shows a strong overall improvement in attendance this school year compared to the last, with one clear exception. So the chronic absenteeism rates in 25-26 this year are lower than they were last year in all months except December, which shows a slight increase consistent with our typical seasonal patterns driven by holidays and illnesses. After December, the trend turns to improvement, and March continues to reflect lower chronic absenteeism than the prior year. So overall, the chart highlights sustained statewide success with more students attending school regularly this year, despite those expected seasonal fluctuations. So kudos to you all for your hard work. It has definitely paid off. Great work. Let's move on to our next slide. All right, I will hand it over to Dr. Kimberly Traverso to give us some updates on both MTSS and school discipline.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for that. What great data. So I just want to congratulate everyone who's in the audience today for a job well done regarding chronic absenteeism, because again, it is about systems work. So we'll lead right into that with the next slide. So I'm sure you probably have seen this before. This is part of our strategic board plan. And we obviously have some focus areas. And if you look to the left-hand side there, the focus is really around improving student outcomes, making those connections with our communities, but also more than just improving student outcomes, but really looking at well-being, having a sense of belonging in school, having learning spaces that are compassionate learning spaces. All these things are really important for us to not only build a community or a strong school community, but we also have to look at our staff and how well are we taking care of our staff as well. And so this is really about how do we pull all our academics, social, emotional, and behavioral integration together so that we are moving the train in the same direction. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next slide. So I did not design this beautiful slide. This was actually AI. So thank you, AI. But the great thing is that all of you remember 2008, it was a big deal. We rolled out the SRBI guidance for Connecticut around tiered interventions. And the focus was a lot on academics at the time. We did have information in there, obviously, around social, emotional, and behavioral, but it wasn't really a strong component of that document. So here we are in 2026, and we are really doing a great job, I feel, and this is not my work alone, this is like a statewide work. And we are really, first and foremost, doing cross-sector connections, meaning that we are pulling in all the right interest groups to ensure that we have a review of this document and the development of this document so that it is not only high quality, but it really does align to what the evidence is around when you're developing systems work. So we're looking, better practices, better data collection, and what does that actually look like? And so our internal team, we have a cross-divisional. So we have talent in there, turnaround office, the performance office, social support services, special education, and the academic office. And then externally, we have an advisory group that is reflective of you, um, district leaders, school leaders, educators on social support side and also in the classroom. We have families who are involved, community providers that are involved as well. So we really did try to do a cross sector of getting as much data collected as possible. And then this year, which I'm really proud of and a tri-chair of, with Brandi actually, is, and Evan McKnight, who's not here, is that we now have an MTSS SCB advisory. And we're very proud of this work because really our mission is to build coherent systems and help districts do that well. And not only do that well, but we're also looking at like how can we make sure that we have the right resources for you that reflect the work that you're doing in Connecticut and that is evidence-based. So you'll hear more about that as well. The other component is also Brandi Brandi, you're amazing. Oh, and you know what? I forgot to say that the SCB also, Wendy Johns is also on that advisory as well. So I apologize, Wendy, but she is definitely a strong member on that team. And then the writing team, Brandi is leading that work. So once we have pull all this data and information collection together, then Brandi and her team will be working on developing our new document, which will be an MTSS document. And then lastly, this is where we want to be, right? We want to build a strong Connecticut with strong systems, and making sure that it's not just about the tiered work per se, right? And also understanding how we collect evidence to for implementation science, but it's really about professional learning, technical assistance. It's also about coaching and how does that translate into your school district, and more importantly, how can we help leaders actually guide this work? So there's a lot that's coming down the pike on that as well. Next slide. And I am also here to provide you with updates. So, just recently, I would say on Monday of this week, we released guidance regarding ISS, OSS, and forced pickups. So, you might want to click on that and look at some of the not only the new laws, but really there's some things in there regarding ISS and OSS that need to be recognized. One is that everyone should have in-school suspension programming, because that is the first direction that we go before we decide to suspend students out of school. That's number one. Number two is that we're hearing a lot about forced pickups, meaning that because of behavioral issues in schools, parents are being asked to pick up their students. If a student is being picked up by their parent, it is considered to be an out of school suspension. So we talk about that in that guidance. We also talk about child find and some other things. So please take a look at that document. It has been shared with districts. So some other updates really quickly is in-school suspensions are limited to 5 days only. It changed from 10 days. And there is a reminder in public schools, preschool programs, out of school suspensions are prohibited. And then in kindergarten to grade 2, the language went from violence and sexual in nature to physical harm to serious harm starting July 1 of 2026. And we do have a definition. Um, Kindergarten to grade 2, also districts must now provide trauma-informed and developmentally appropriate services that align with the behavior intervention plan, the IEP, and or Section 504. As soon as the child returns from the out-of-school suspension. And lastly, this is also going to start July 1 of 2026. Twice expelled students prior to this change in the law, you could be suspended at ages 16 to 18 and expelled. And then after that time, if you're expelled again, we do not have to provide you with an education. That law has changed. So if you're twice expelled and you're between the ages of 16 and 18, you can actually have your due education, which is a great change in the law. So if you have any questions about this, I think my contact information is definitely in the guidance document, but also I'm sure my email address is in here somewhere. So actually, I'll just put it in the chat for everyone if you have any questions in regards to any of this. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to, I think, I'm not sure who I'm supposed to turn it over to, but
Thank you,
advanced
Kim.
folks. There you go.
Thank you, Kim, for that wonderful overview of multifaceted team effort in building coherent MTSS systems and those important updates on school discipline. Just a reminder that all of this is linked in the slide deck, and it will be both emailed out and being shared in the chat. So I do want to present our first presenter today. Dr. Brandi Simonsen is a professor of special education in the Neag School of Education at the University of Connecticut. She is also a co-director of the National Technical Assistance Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, also known as PBIS. She is the co-principal investigator of the National Integrated Multi-Tiered Systems of Support Research Network. Professor Simonsen's scholarship focuses on supporting educators' implementation of PBIS and MTSS across a continuum of settings. So I'd like to welcome Brandi with us today and have her share her slides.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. My goal is to be a warm-up act for Wendy. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time with you all, kind of clarifying some of our understandings or maybe misunderstandings about MTSS. Because I don't know about in your district or your school, but I think this is an acronym that gets thrown out a lot. And everyone kind of thinks they know what it looks like and sounds like, but any two people talking about it would realize they had slightly different impressions. And this is true in our state, it's true nationally, it's even true internationally. So I think getting on the same page a little bit is helpful so that when Wendy picks up, we can kind of hear her talk in a more specific way. I'm also wanting to give a shout out if you look at the credit line at the bottom, Hetty Chang from Attendance Works, who I think you all have had with you earlier in this series. She and I co-developed these slides. We were hoping to actually do them at the back to school event, and we ended up running out of time. So this was a chance for us to get to share them with you all today. So with that, I wanted to talk, as I said, a little bit just to get us on the same page with what MTSS is and what it is not. So I'm going to make sure that I can see chat because I'm going to have you all engage with me in chat for a little bit. So first of all, I wanted us to think about when we talk about MTSS with our colleagues, with families, with folks in the community, the kinds of things or the kinds of impressions we hear. So I'm going to share some of the myths or the maybe misunderstandings that I have heard. And then in a second, I'm going to invite you all to pop some additional examples into chat because I feel like there are lots of ways that people interpret or sometimes misinterpret MTSS. So the first one is for folks coming from this kind of more general ed perspective. Sometimes we hear that special education is really tier 3. So we get a kind of myth or misunderstanding that students with disabilities are not really served in tiers 1 or tier 2. They're really served in tier 3. And we'll talk in a second about why that's a myth and why we need to unpack that. But for right now, I'm just going to throw the myths out. I've also heard that students with disabilities are not even in the triangle that we use to talk about MTSS, that they're like tier 4 or they're in their own triangle or they're someplace outside of this space. And so again, you all probably have responses in your head of why those are harmful myths, but we're going to just pause on them for a second. On the flip side, sometimes I have heard that MTSS is only about special education. So I have heard that MTSS is a special education initiative. As we know in Connecticut, that would have funding implications for what can fund MTSS work. It also has implications in a district or a school for who does MTSS work. Another myth I've heard is that MTSS is only a process for referral to special ed. So occasionally when I've asked someone what MTSS is, they'll talk about the team where kids' cases are sent if there's a concern for them to get access to special ed. So I'm going to pause my myth sharing and ask you all to share in chat some of the myths or misunderstandings you all have heard as you're talking to folks about MTSS. I'm going to give you a chance to write for a second, so I'm going to be quiet. Yeah, misunderstandings that IEPs kind of prevent a student from being included in MTSS or that services that are in an IEP could never be delivered alongside tier 2 or tier 3 supports for other students. We already do MTSS. Isn't it the same thing as PBIS? That is such a good question, Wendy. Any others that folks are hearing or questions folks are hearing from folks? Just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep us moving, but yeah, special ed is always more than MTSS intervention. So you all can keep going and chat, and I'll try and multitask a little bit by peeking as I'm going. But yeah, some folks are not familiar with MTSS, and if anyone on the call is also not familiar with MTSS, hopefully this gives you a bit of a primer. So I mentioned the myths that I had raised, and some of the ones coming up in chat are somewhat problematic, right? They have us view MTSS in a pretty kind of siloed or different way. Yeah, multilingual learners, also folks to be thinking about. Some folks will perceive that they can't be included in MTSS. Our message is that MTSS is actually a service delivery mechanism. It's a framework. It's a way to continuously improve. It is a framework that serves all students. And by all, we actually mean all. I think sometimes we throw the word all around quite a bit too. But we mean MTSS as an inclusive framework for students with and without identified disabilities, students served in general education, special education, students served on an IEP 504 plan, students from all racial and ethnic backgrounds, students from all LGBTQIA plus represented backgrounds, students from, and I could continue, right? It really is for all students. And when we don't name some of that, we miss opportunities to be really thoughtful about what prevention looks like for each and every student. And we can think about preventative frameworks kind of at the school-wide universal level, but we also think about prevention in the upper tiers, in tier 2 and tier 3, how we can prevent students from needing additional support, how we can prevent students who have needs from experiencing challenges based on those needs, right? It is intended to be a preventative framework. The intent of MTSS, and I'm saying intent on purpose because our outcomes sometimes show us it's not working as intended, but our intent is to be inclusive, to have our supports be truly universal so each and every student has access to those supports in academic, social, emotional, behavioral, attendance, engagement, all the different disciplines and domains, and to recognize the alignment and the importance of intersection of those three tiers so all students benefit from all tiers of support. Not all students need tier 2 or tier 3 support, but all students need and benefit from tier 1 support, including kids who receive services in upper tiers, students with disabilities, and so on. So the main message of all of that is MTSS is a framework for all. It is a universal, inclusive framework for all students. So thinking about what that looks like means that we have to build MTSS from a strong foundation of robust and differentiated universal or tier 1 support. And I don't always read words from my slides, but those words are really thoughtfully chosen. So if you notice tier 1, universal tier, underlies all the other tiers of support. And tier 1 is not one size fits all. Tier 1 is robust and differentiated support for all students, for all educators, for all families. Some students need targeted or tier 2 supports layered on top of tier 1, but notice tier 1 is still peeking through. And some students, educators and families, need intensive or tier 3 support layered on top of tier 2 and tier 1. But again, tier 1 and tier 2 are now still peeking through. So all of those supports are layered, but they all rest on a foundation of robust and differentiated tier 1. Okay, next myth. MTSS is only about behavior, if you learned about MTSS as PBIS, or MTSS is only about academics, if you learned about MTSS for reading or for math. How many of y'all have heard that myth? Okay, I can't see all of your hands, but I'm going to ask you to raise them anyway in the next section. So my question for y'all is, are you implementing MTSS in your district or school to support academics? How many of you have MTSS in place for academic support? I'm seeing some heads shaking, some electronic or actual hand raises, some thumbs up. Anyway, is all good. Always are welcome. How many of you are implementing MTSS, whether you call it PBIS or MTSS, SEB or whatever, for behavior? I'm seeing again some thumbs up, some nods. How many of y'all, I hope this is closer to 100% given the audience, how many of y'all are implementing MTSS for attendance or engagement? Seeing again, some nods, some thumbs up, some lots of thumbs up. I love that. How about to support school climate? Right. So the misrule about MTSS is only for fill in the blank is clearly a misrule because we can actually be really efficient by thinking about and using an MTSS framework to organize supports for all of the things. And I mentioned, or Thalia mentioned, that I come from the Center on PBIS. That's one of the hats I wear. And so PBIS is the most widely implemented evidence-based MTSS framework that exists. And so I'm borrowing some of our research to talk about the benefits of MTSS because it's the place where we have the deepest research and a cute infographic that describes it. So obviously, when you're implementing PBIS or MTSS for social emotional behavioral support, we would expect to see improved behavior, but we also see improvements in academics. So those are outcomes that we get to see connected to implementation. We also see improved attendance. So when we're doing this work well, we see that students are not just kind of engaging in better behavioral and academic skills when they're in school, but they're actually getting to school to learn and grow those skills. I mentioned already behavior and academics. We have lots of data and outcomes around that. We see that students improve and enhance school climate. And if you notice where the red circles have popped up, there's a ton of other outcomes. The hyperlink to this document is in the slide, so you all can peek. But there's improved outcomes for students. There's reduced use and reliance on exclusionary discipline for students, but that also supports educators. And there's good evidence around improving outcomes for teachers and educators as well. So the big message is it works. So MTSS is a good investment, and where we can integrate and align supports, we can be even better at providing those supports for students. In part, that's because students show up with this beautiful constellation of strengths and needs. And so by integrating supports, we can better meet those in an efficient way. We're also putting a lot on educators in the classrooms these days. And so when we can help educators see practices aligning and fitting together, we set educators up for success. And so while there's still research that needs to be done on MTSS supporting all of the different domains, one of the things we're anticipating is that we see increased efficiency and we reduce duplication of efforts. So it makes our lives easier in schools, in districts. And again, it supports teachers, students, and families in a better way. Okay, next one. MTSS is only about a program or curriculum or intervention or a set of practices. In other words, it doesn't have other components to it. So thumbs up or thumbs down. MTSS is just about the practices, interventions, things we do for kids. Seeing some heads shaking, some thumbs up, some thumbs down. So this is kind of an interesting misrule, and I set us up a little bit to think about it because we often have a triangle as a picture of MTSS. And the triangle organizes the supports for students. To be clear, it doesn't organize kids. It organizes supports. So students are served within and across tiers. But the triangle, I think, is a really helpful graphic. Obviously, I used it. But it sometimes has us think more intentionally about practices. And Kim already mentioned this. The power of MTSS is actually in the pieces that support the practices. It's in using data to drive decisions. It's especially in building the systems that set educators up for success so that they can implement those practices with high fidelity and sufficient intensity to benefit each and every kid. It's having all of those driven by locally determined meaningful outcomes. And in the center of all of that work is equity. It's making sure that the practices, systems, and data are working for each and every student, each and every family, each and every educator. So when we think about MTSS, the practices for sure are a part of it. Those are all the things we're doing for our students. But equally important is the systems we're putting in place for the grown-ups and the data we're using to drive continuous improvement, again, centering equity and aligned with locally meaningful outcomes. So for us to talk about doing MTSS, it is this comprehensive prevention framework. It's not just the things we're doing to support students. So when we think about the systems pieces, and Kim mentioned this, at the state level, at the district level, and at the school level, We're thinking about the teaming structures that are leading all of these efforts, and optimally, those teaming structures are integrated. So rather than having an attendance team, a behavior team, a climate team, and we could keep going, we're thinking about integrated teaming that allows schools and districts to make efficient, effective decisions. Especially at the state and district level, we're thinking about having the right voices on that team with partner engagement. We're thinking about aligning work and funding streams. We're thinking about policy. We're thinking about educator capacity and knowledge. At the district and school level in particular, supported by the state work, we're thinking about how we train, coach, and use data to guide implementation for our educators, and we're celebrating local successes. So those systems pieces are really important, critical components of any MTSS approach. So putting all that together and getting ready to turn it over to Wendy, MTSS is a comprehensive prevention framework. It prioritizes systems and data to guide implementation and continuous improvement of aligned and integrated continuum of practices to improve the outcomes and experiences of all students, educators, and families. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And I don't know, Dahlia, if you want to tag back in before Wendy tags in, or if Wendy is going to just get started.
Yes, thank you, Brandi, for identifying some of those common misconceptions that we have regarding MTSS and really helping us understand that it is a universal um, framework and a vehicle for our work on attendance. So I would like to introduce our next presenter. Wendy Johns serves as the Director of Pupil Services for the Waterbury Public Schools, where she is a member of the district's seniors leadership team. In this role, she oversees the administration, coordination, and development of special education programs and comprehensive student support services. So welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. And thank you, Brandi. Appreciate that leading up to the presentation. So today we're really going to focus on the journey that Waterbury Public Schools has taken, moving from great things that were happening in buildings to developing a framework of MTSS, and the steps that we've taken to focus on goals, data-based decision making, and hopefully be able to share what we've done so that other districts can utilize this framework and model this within their school districts as well. So today we'll be focusing on building safe, positive, and learning conducive schools, the Waterbury MTSS approach. So when I first came in June of 2023, I was shocked, honestly, where Connecticut was in some of the MTSS work. I had come from being a principal in a different state in Delaware, and our legislation was a little bit ahead. So as a principal, I was actively utilizing MTSS, was attending Northeast PBIS conferences, presenting. I mean, I was all things MTSS. So when I came into the role and I was working with our now superintendent, Dr. Swartz, he was like, yes, let's go write that, manual. Let's get this into Waterbury. I was like, okay, what are we doing? What's the things? Like, tell me all the things. And he's like, okay, you can do it. I'm like, okay, let's do this. So what we'll be sharing today are the things and the growth journey that we have put in place here. And we're very proud of everything that we've started and continue to do. Next slide, please. So we started our journey, obviously, with where we were and where we needed to go. So this slide outlines the commitment that Waterbury Public Schools has to fostering safe and positive learning environments by focusing on future-oriented systems that support students, staff, and the community, which you have to involve all stakeholders. It emphasizes a unified goal among the stakeholders and how it's necessary to drive rapid, systematic change and improve academic, behavioral, and social-emotional outcomes. If you notice that last bullet point, we really focused on how our past was in the past. And that mindset needed to shift so that we could move forward. Next slide, please. Look at that, Brandi. Oh my goodness, we're on the same page. Our integrated MTSS approach provides a path forward. So improving student outcomes and supporting teacher success while reducing exclusionary discipline through professional evidence-based systems. So you'll notice, obviously, Brandi shared that PBIS is directly aligned with MTSS, and all of those best practices help us to be able to keep kids in school. And that really, if you build a solid framework with MTSS and have those database discussions, school climate keeps kids in school. And that is really, truly what a solid MTSS structure is all about. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines the Waterbury Public Schools commitment to building safe and equitable learning environments by transitioning from past practices towards future-oriented district-wide systems. So we set a very clear goal, and you'll notice the goal is here, obviously focusing on a school-based team approach. So this was obviously set before, this new wonderful legislation was put in place, but this is very much focused on MTSS framework. Systems of change did not happen overnight, and we continue to perfect our practice. So this year, Waterbury was fortunate to hire Jackie Davis, who is here on the call today. She's our Director of Climate and Student Supports, and she is really focusing her efforts on continuing to empower school climate committees and to continue this tiered work. So we're really fortunate to have her. But looking at tier 1, 2, and 3, that is the foundation of how we're moving our MTSS work forward in Waterbury. So next slide, please. Any MTSS system needs a strong foundation that starts with tier 1, and Brandi really reviewed that. So this slide outlines the school-wide tier 1 MTSS implementation framework. It focuses on essential systems and resources that school-based teams used to maintain a positive learning climate. So you'll notice there's 4 main aspects that we really needed to kind of start small with our tier 1, but obviously we can build upon that and learn and grow. But when I developed the manual for Waterbury Public Schools, we really focused on utilizing these 4 main aspects, focusing really truly on the monthly meeting aspect. And Brandi was saying we need to condense the amount of monthly meeting teams we have because we were calling it all kinds of wonderful different things. But if we call it one thing and focus on students and the data, that's when the true change begins. And then once we're looking at school-wide systems, we can say, okay, let's drill down. And if we can talk about the next slide, that's when we drill down to smaller groups of students. So this slide details the tier 2 implementation phase, which provides intensified social emotional support and interventions for students who need more than standard tier 1 framework. It emphasizes a collaborative approach where all staff members can use a formal referral form to recommend students for targeted support based on their specific needs. So in some school districts, they're calling it different things, obviously, with a change in legislation. Some districts are calling it the challenging behavior form. Some districts are calling it their own thing. We initially called it the tier 2 referral form, but whatever you're calling it, teachers have a right now to be able to ask for support, and 2 business days, they need to get that support from the school climate specialist within the building. So obviously, students, as we know, have different needs. And in tier 2, we need to look for different interventions to meet those needs. Next slide, please. Tier 3 implementation. So this slide focuses in on highly individualized and intensive phase that utilizes a research-based approach. Now, coming from the state of Delaware, we had utilized this, we had trained on this. This was something that I lived and breathed. So I really needed to be able to bring this along and train the implementers so that we had one type of approach utilized in the district. Working with Dr. Traverso, our school district needed to make some changes because obviously with my special education director hat on, there were some things that were being identified. And this helped us to be able to make some changes in my special education world as well. So being able to put in place a solid way that we were writing our functional behavioral assessments as well as behavior intervention plans, but also meet the needs of our general education students that may be struggling in our buildings. PTR, or Prevent, Teach, Reinforce, is a great way to do that. It's also a fiscally responsible way to do it. It's not that expensive. So districts that are seeking a tier 3 intervention that's not too economically challenging for your budget, this is a great resource for you. Next slide, please. Okay, so professional development for educators is a cornerstone of the MTSS framework, focusing on a small number of evidence-based and culturally relevant SEB strategies or social, emotional, and behavioral strategies. By centering on the mantra, do what works and do it well, the district ensures that staff are not overwhelmed, but rather deeply proficient in the most impactful practices. For MTSS to be effective, teachers must undergo specific training that shifts from their current approaches, mostly from reactive discipline to proactive instruction. So we're going to focus now on how we trained our teachers. All right, so back to basics, do what works and do it well. So this slide emphasized the shift towards a mindset where behavior change is treated as an instructional process, requiring a fundamental change in adult behavior and environmental procedures to influence student outcomes. It asserts that meaningful interventions are not just for students, but involve systematic changes in staff practices and school-wide procedures. So sometimes it's hard for us to look as an adult that we need to make the change. But honestly, that's often where it needs to start with MTSS. Next slide, please. Oh, this is one of my favorite slides ever. So a shift in adult mindset is often required to make true change in school climate reform. So this slide illustrates how adults have to be the first ones to change to have a positive impact on student behavior. So true behavior change is an instructional process. We change student behavior by changing adult behavior. All right, next slide, please. Oh, look at this. I know Brandi is like, her heart is warm. This slide introduces a major versus minor behavioral flowchart, which serves as a clinical roadmap for staff to distinguish between classroom managed behaviors and those requiring office intervention. So by clearly defining definitions and step-by-step response process, the district ensures that disciplinary actions are consistent, predictable, and aligned with restorative practices. So you'll notice that these are taught to the adults. And I made sure to clear this with bargaining units. So on the left, these are things that teachers should be handling within their classrooms. And then on the right, these are things that really, according to our code of conduct structure and our level system, should really truly be referred. So these are things, obviously teachers and our, members can always refer, right? But these truly are things that should be handled in the classroom versus office referrals. But these are things that are taught early on and reinforced within our schools. Next slide, please. Okay, look at these behavioral matrices. These warm my heart. The slide emphasizes that positive student behavior is not assumed, but must be explicitly taught through the consistent use of a district-wide behavioral matrix. By integrating this matrix into daily routines, staff can ensure that all students are reinforced, reminded, and redirected towards appropriate behaviors in a predictable and supportive environment. So sometimes schools can start small and they can do this as a school-wide matrix and have the same matrix school-wide. And that way everyone talks the same vocabulary. That's very important in starting off with MTSS. Okay, so you set expectations as a school. Maybe it's be responsible, be respectful, be safe. And then you set certain routines throughout the day. So that's school-wide matrix. And it's very important that when you're setting up these important routines, teachers and staff and administrators are all speaking the same language. Next slide, please. Okay, now moving on to how we worked with administration staff. This slide highlights that administrator professional development is directly aligned with district-wide goals to reduce disciplinary offenses through a restorative approach. It emphasizes that leaders are trained to make data-based decisions to ensure that interventions are both appropriate and effective for the school community. Next slide, please. So through a book study during monthly principal meetings, administrators explored 9 hacks. So if you've ever heard of the book Hacking School Discipline, it's a great one. If you haven't read it, please pursue. Great one to introduce restorative practices. Obviously, it's a great book that talks about transforming school discipline into a culture of communication, mindfulness, and empathy. This restorative approach prioritizes student accountability and harm repair over punitive sanctions, ensuring that students receive due process while maintaining a growth mindset environment. So as we focused with our administrators, we really talked about how we can utilize restorative questioning during the due process situation. So if a student comes into an administrator's office, we really talked about how we can use the restorative questions to provide a student their due process. And therefore, students are showing accountability and hopefully repairing the harm when they return into the community. The goal is to reduce some of those exclusionary practices and reduce our discipline as well. Next slide, please. This slide details how utilizing a tiered fidelity inventory process, administrators use a systematic checklist to evaluate and strengthen school-wide MTSS implementation. By assembling diverse teams and analyzing data gaps, leadership can develop actionable plans to ensure that Tier 1, 2, and 3 supports are meeting district benchmarks and effectively serving students. So you have to assemble your team first, right? You can't implement MTSS if you don't know what you have in place. So it's important that you're, basically serving what you have available. You can't intervene and support students if you don't know what staff and resources are available within your school first. So this is important for every administrative team to do. Next slide, please. Data. Data is wonderful. This slide explains how using data facilitates more precise problem solving and increases the effectiveness of school-wide solutions. It emphasizes that data-based decision-making promotes equity by shifting the focus from the individual blame to identifying the systematic changes and supports necessary to prevent future issues. So if you're looking really towards the right, restorative practices is all about making fair and equitable decisions. And you really truly do that by focusing on the data. It's really about the deed versus the doer. They talk about that a lot. And if you're asking questions like what happened or who was involved or why, those questions are not going to lead to true systematic change. You need to start asking different types of questions and using your data to make those changes. And those are just some examples that your teams can start using when you meet monthly, or if you have follow-up meetings in your Tier 2 to focus on individual students. Next slide, please. This slide defines data as the diverse collection of information, including attendance, office referrals, and climate scores, used to strategically allocate school resources and time. It highlights that for data to be truly effective in action planning and behavioral reinforcement, It must be consistently documented and shared across the team. We do this now under the current legislation by conducting surveys that drive our school climate improvement plans. So I appreciate the time that we've had. And on the next slide, you can see some of the resources that I utilized to create the initial manual, but there's plenty of additional resources available on CSDE's website. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy. I know I definitely appreciated that shared accountability model and that clarification on the explicit behaviors. As an ML teacher in diverse districts, it's hard to expect behaviors from students that we haven't taught. And so really thinking about, what place teachers, administrators have in that process is important and was wonderful. We do have a few extra minutes. I don't know if there are any questions that you can address to both Brandi or Wendy in the chat or comments. We can look at the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you have a hand up.
Question.
Okay.
Hey, Wendy, I remember you did some great work when you first came in regards to leadership. Can you talk about how you got them on the same page? Because that can be very difficult to sort of, again, talking about mindsets, and getting them all to like work together. So can you sort of tell us the story behind that story?
Sure. So obviously in Waterbury, we are a Tier 4 district as far as some of our exclusionary practices and some of our data needed to rapidly change. But I didn't kind of come in and be like, hey, we're a Tier 4 district. Let's all get on the same page. Obviously, I was able to meet and do an early on administrative professional development to be able to show a different way to look at how we were all doing things in silos and how we could framework things differently and call it all the same thing. Because our schools were working so hard to support students and doing great work. We just needed to all kind of call it the same thing. And I think when you're able to communicate effectively and use the same common vocabulary, it makes things easier for everyone. And by creating the MTSS manual for the district early on, we were all able to say the same thing. I was able to then also create an agenda for everyone to use that could then be shared with their assistant superintendents. They were having lots of different meetings monthly, and by creating just one monthly meeting, it saved time. So individuals were appreciative of that, and they were able to report out effectively because they were condensing some of their conversations. It was also a way to show support because we were doing monthly newsletters to be able to share out on communication and different climate resources. So being able to get everyone on the same page, have common vocabulary, provide lots of resources, lots of support. I think that truly is the way that you're able to build trust, being a new person to a district, but also being able to show everyone that you can work hard still, but get time back.
Thank you, Wendy. Any other questions before we close out?
I have one question. Hi, Annika Knox. I'm one of the school social workers at the Bridge Academy in Bridgeport. I loved what you're doing. And what really connected with me was this idea of creating one meeting. So we have so many meetings and it's the same people in every meeting. We have an MTSS meeting, we have an attendance meeting, we have a grade level meeting for each grade level. Can you give me an example? What is your MTSS meeting? Who's in there and what do you discuss? And is it possible to combine all these into one or two, maybe, monthly meetings?
Well, I have obviously, Jackie here's on the call too. Kind of what we shifted towards this year was ensuring that agenda items were talked about monthly in one format, right? So, really, as a school climate committee, you're able to address pertinent agenda items monthly. And if you have those on a preset agenda, you should have a school climate specialist within your building.
Hmm.
And those should be set based upon data that's trending. Um, and obviously, MTSS, PBIS, you've got your big five, makes me smile in my heart. But you really should be looking for what your data is driving, right? And you should be looking, is there attendance markers that are, driving something in your building? Why is that happening? Are there certain grade levels that you need to focus on this month? Are there certain things that we need to focus on to bring that grade level to school? Do we need to drill down and put certain systems in place to support those students? Is there certain areas of the school day, like recess or hallway shifts, or is A days or B days certain, systems and areas of the day that we need to focus on? And those are the things that you put into your agenda. But that needs to be preset so that when you sit down, you're having very focused discussions. But everything can be outlined into one meeting. So you can kind of condense all of those discussions and have very purposeful systems discussions, because that's where the true change happens.
I love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Wendy. We'll do one more question. I saw that Jacqueline had her hand up. No? All right.
We
So,
can't hear, I don't think we can hear her.
Jacqueline, make sure you
Jackie,
unmute.
So I'm unmuted now, but my
There you
mic
go.
I do both. So yeah, I just wanted to add, like, one of the other benefits of this manual that Wendy was able to create and roll out in our district was the impact on equity. When we're talking about the fact that Waterbury is a tier 4 district and looking at disproportionate outcomes when it comes to behaviors among students, um, I think having that manual was a way for everyone to be more consistent in how they were responding to behaviors and buildings. When you have 33 different schools and programs, it is so important to make sure, again, like Wendy said, that there is that common language and common response to behaviors. And also, we want to make sure that there's consistency for our families and our students. If we have a parent that has students in multiple buildings and one thing is happening in another building, but something completely different is going on in another building, that does not build the relationship and the trust that exists between us as a system and our community. And so some of the stuff that Wendy has shared with you guys today has been a tremendous resource for us as a district to be able to address some of those issues of equity and consistency. So again, great job, Wendy. Thank you for sharing all of the resources.
Absolutely. Thank you to all our presenters.
Rhonda,
We have a couple.
can I just
Yeah,
add one
go
thing?
ahead.
I just want to make a clarifying statement. I'm not sure if everyone saw it in the chat, but when folks are talking about tier 4, what they're referencing is not in the system of support for MTSS. What they're referencing is that in our data for school discipline, we have tier 3, which is disproportionality, and then we have tier 4, which is high rates of suspension. And so and I put the link in the chat, so if anyone wants to look at their schools, they can see where they fall. But there's no correlation between that and what we're talking about today in MTSS. And I just want to make sure that folks are aware, because there is no belief around tier 4 in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, I think it's sort of dangerous. So just know that that's in regards to how we have set it up on EdSite.
Thank you for that clarification. And before we set off, I'm not sure where our slides went, but on one of the last slides is our survey. I would really appreciate your feedback, and I'm sure our team, Caroline and Kari, would really appreciate that the feedback in building our Talk Tuesday content for next year. So we will be sending out an email with the survey link, and it is again in your chat. Please keep that link open and complete that for us. Next slide, please, Dan. All right. So don't miss our last and final session on May 19th. It is a special session to just dialogue as a community about the celebrations and challenges of this past year. So don't miss that as well. Next slide, please. Here are some resources, and there are resources as well on the back on our final slides that that you can peruse through at your own leisure. I wanted to thank you for attending today, and I hope to see you all on our final session, May 19th. Thank you, and have a wonderful day today. All right.